So how are things, man? How's your Wednesday morning going?
It's going good, dude. I'm busy. So Sal had his baby last night.
No way. I was gonna
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
right away.
yeah. Aurelius Jordan DiStefano.
Wow.
So yeah,
That,
yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
So they were able
yep.
to do it with the midwife then.
Actually, she was 16 days late, which once you're 14
Oh,
days late, you have to go to the hospital. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear the story. So this is fresh news. I mean, I just found out last night. We were all really worried because it went 16 days past the due date. Once you're past 2 weeks, it's law that they won't let you have a baby at home. So they weren't able to use the midwife because because of COVID, Sal's the only one that's allowed in the hospital. And we'll see. He'll tell the story, I'm sure, when I get connected with him today and we record for a podcast this week. So I haven't actually even heard the whole story, but I do know that she ended up having to use both Pitocin, and they had to induce her. And on top of that, she had the epidural, and then she also ended up having C-section. All the things that they were trying to avoid ended up being inevitable for them. So, but the baby's healthy and good, and so yeah, right. So they're happy and excited. And I'm sure we'll discuss exactly how it all went down when Sal gets here.
Good stuff. Well, I'm glad to hear it. It was I've been following along. Sal's been worried. You guys are always questioning it, so it's all good. I'm glad to hear the baby's healthy.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for coming on the Athletes Podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. How's it going? How's it been? I know you just started it not that long ago. So how are things going?
We are just over a year now, so it's we're 5 years behind you guys in the sense of the long game, but we're having fun with it, man. This will be episode 57, and I'm loving the process, embracing the suck, like you guys talk about so much. I'm just loving what I'm doing right now and learning, going through the experience.
Cool, very cool.
Yeah. So, and I mean, with the Athletes Podcast, we're sharing pro athlete stories. Kind of a Joe Rogan style, specifically for athletes is the end goal. And I know you guys focus with MindPump Media to disrupt the health, wellness, and fitness industry. And you talk about why most people shouldn't train like pro athletes. So I wanted to bring you guys on as kind of the other end of the spectrum and share and explain. I was super pumped to just have you guys on and showcase to the listeners as to why the majority of people shouldn't be working out like pro athletes and how they should be working out.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really cool question, and I think probably a major fallacy in the health and fitness space, because we use a lot of these athletes to market, right? They're famous, they're popular, they're fit, they're good looking, they can do amazing things, and so they make for great marketing tools, great for covers of magazines, great for ads, to use athletes to market to people about health and fitness, and it's inspiring, it's motivating. Most of us look up to these athletes if we were athletes or want to be athletes ourselves. So they're a great tool for marketers to use to market to the average person. But the reality is athletics is not what's ideal for the body. Sports is high performance, and you do things repetitively over and over to get great at them. Name a sport. I mean, any sport, in order to be great at that sport, you have to do that sport repetitively, day in, day out, for years and years of your life. And that's just not ideal. It's not ideal for your joints. It's not ideal for your metabolism. It's high performance. And so, training that way for the average person is not ideal. Now, I want to caution when I say that too, because then I don't want people to be discouraged that say, man, out of my love to play basketball, and that helps me stay in shape. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I know when we first came out and we talked about this, I know we offended a lot of people, and a lot of people were, well, that's, I do this, I swim every day, and I do these things that are sports, and it keeps me in shape, and I love it. So how could you shit on it? And it's like, well, no, it's not that. I don't believe that you can do a sport and stay healthy and fit, by no means. I mean, I think that if you have found something, whether it be, marathon running, swimming, playing basketball, playing soccer at the park. Like, if you do something, I mean, I for most of my fitness career played basketball 3 times a week. And so, here I am saying that training like an athlete is not the ideal way to get in shape or be in shape, but it doesn't mean that you can't do those or use those things as tools, right? So it's just not the most optimal way. If I had somebody who comes to me, which the average client comes to you and says, hey, I want to lose, 15 to 50 pounds, Adam, or I want to build 10 pounds of muscle. Playing a sport to get you there is definitely not the best way to do it, because what you're looking for, the adaptation that you're looking for as an athlete, is to become optimal at whatever it is that you're doing. So whatever sport you're as, your body, you want to be good at it. Well, you're actually chasing the opposite when you're trying to get change in your physique. So when you're trying to change your body composition, you actually don't want to get good at exactly what, not to an extent you do. So you adapt, grow, change, build muscle, but you don't want to be so good at it that your body has become so efficient that it's no longer using a lot of calories in order to do it, or it's not sending a signal to build more muscle because it's gotten so adapted to what you're doing. And that's what happens with athletics. The first time, let's take somebody who's just getting into or wanting to get into shape, and they love like the sport of basketball. And so they decide, okay, I'm going to play basketball 4 days a week. And that initial, month or two, they lose weight, right? They lose some good weight because they haven't been really moving anymore. Now they're playing basketball. And then over time, and that only takes probably, 6 to 12 weeks before it gets really adapted to that. Now the body has become very efficient at playing basketball 4 days a week, meaning you're good at basketball, but you're no longer as good at burning fat, or you're not as good as building muscle, which that's not advantageous for most of your average clients who come to you for a personal trainer and say, hey, I want to build muscle or lose body fat. So when I talk about athletics being a terrible way to get in shape, that's where I'm coming from. Is not that can I play basketball and stay healthy and fit, or play a sport? No, absolutely you can. It's just not the most efficient way at it. There's much better ways to getting in shape.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've learned. I mean, I started listening to you guys about 6 months ago. I was introduced to it from a friend. You guys have that at the end of your shows. Share this with your friends. We went on a walk, and she was talking to me about, she's a personal trainer as well, Maddie Henderson, give her a shout out. But that's one of the things I've learned is, like, I was trying to go through, I'm trying to get bigger, stronger. I kind of looked the part. If I'm going to host an athlete's podcast, I should, look like an athlete, right? I'm like, man, I'm going and playing sports, trying to, do everything possible to get into better shape. And, I'm not adding size because I'm going and playing basketball. I'm going and walking the golf course for 4 hours a day, or doing these things. It's just burning so much that I can't add size. So I actually, I'm on day 18 now of MAPS Anabolic, because as soon as I committed with you guys, got you guys locked in, I'm like, man, I got to start reaping what I sow here, go through your guys' program. So I'm loving it. Had a trigger session today, just this morning, right before this. And one of the biggest things that I've learned from you guys is just being consistent over a consistent period of time, right? And making sure that your effort is consistent over whatever duration of time that you're going to be training for, and making sure that you can do that day in and day out. And it's not something that you're going to go on a 4-week fad diet. Right. It's one of the biggest issues with fitness and health and wellness nowadays, is that people are like, go overboard. They're 20 pounds overweight. They're like, okay, I want to drop this weight and be good to go now. But, you need something that's going to be sustainable over the next 40 years of your life. How do you try and push that and promote that with MindPump?
Well, that was a paradigm shattering moment for me as a personal trainer. For the first probably 5 years or so of my career, what I thought was a good trainer was somebody who could give the client, the answers. Like, you come to me and you want to lose weight, I could write up a diet plan, and I could cheerlead and push you there. Right? I could motivate you and inspire you to come every single day, and that's what I thought a lot of my job was. The problem with that is, what I found is what you're alluding to right now is you get people that have this emotional high because they're tired of being fat, or they're tired of being skinny, and they're motivated to come in, or it's New Year's resolution. And so they have all this energy that I'm going to change this, I'm going to do all these things. And so they kind of throw the whole kitchen sink at it. I mean, they start dieting, they start training as many days as they can. They're sacrificing the things that they were doing before, and they're all in. And just that just promotes the off and on the wagon, or the binge and restrict type of thing. So it took me years, though, to kind of piece that together. It really did. And I've shared on the podcast before, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about it, but I remember, like, about 5-6 years into my career, I back where the company I worked at used to give you trophies for, being like the top performer in the company. And I had all these glass trophies that said I was the best. I'm number one in the company, and it's mainly for sales. If you sold a lot of personal training, trained a lot of hours, you got ranked as one of the best personal trainers out there. But what I realized was when I looked at all these clients and I looked at it and saw where they were at a year, 2 years later after training with me, most of them had kind of reverted back to what they were before they hired me. And I asked myself, I'm like, am I really the best? Is this what the best looks like? Like, they help people for 6 months or a year, or they go off and then those people get fat again, or those people fall off the wagon and lose all the muscle that they built. Like, I can't imagine this is ideal. And I realized what I was focusing on was getting them to the goal, or giving them the answers to the test, and not trying to so much change behaviors into their life. And what I realized was that if I could change one small behavior for the good in that person's life, I was doing far more than if I radically changed somebody's body in 6 weeks, just by giving them all the answers and pushing them and motivating to the. So my whole mentality of how I started coaching clients would completely change. Instead of, I used to be the trainer too, and, I'd be sitting down with, a client, and they'd say, I'd say, how much can you commit to, coming to the gym? And they'd be, well, I'm busy and kids, and, maybe I could come 2 days a week. I would you got to commit to at least three hours to 4 hours. And I was always pushing them to do more, and commit to this fitness lifestyle. And that was such backwards thinking, because now the way I approach a client like that is, listen, if I want you to actually commit to the very least amount you could do. So if you tell me 2 or 3, I might go, are you sure you can get 2 or 3? Because I want to make sure this is something that you'll never miss. So maybe we should start with 1 or 2, and then we could eventually work to 3 or 4 days a week. And that's because I later on figured out I need to get these people to create good behaviors, and then we can build off of that. And if I did that, they were much more likely to maintain and continue on this as a lifestyle versus just this short 6-month window goal that they're going to push themselves to. And so, yeah, that radically changed how I coach people, because it was, and it's, to this day, it's still a message that we're trying to present on MindPump that's kind of counter to the fitness space. The fitness space is, surrounded around motivation, hype, and, beast mode, and all out, and no days off, and, leg day, looking crippled, like
no pain, no gain.
Yeah. No pain, no gain, all these, right? These are all famous sayings in the fitness space that we use to motivate and hype, people up, to get them in the gym or get them exercising or keep them going. And what you have to realize is that's an emotion, right? And it's fleeting. We all have good days and bad days. We're happy, we're sad. And if you are relying on your mood to motivate you to do the things you need to do for your body and your health, then it's going to change dramatically week by week based off of your emotions and feelings. Whereas if you create behaviors, like, for example, when you're sad, something completely terrible happens in your life, do you stop brushing your teeth? I mean, is that something that you just, a family member dies and then all of a sudden you decide you're not going to brush your teeth all week? Like, no.
Hygiene goes out the window.
Right. That doesn't fucking happen. Like, you continue to brush your teeth. Well, but if you didn't, I mean, people would understand you're going through something, but it doesn't matter. You've created that as a part of your life, that it's a non-negotiable, it's a behavior, it's a habit, it's for your hygiene. You don't even question it. And so that's what you're trying to do for somebody for health and fitness. Is like, you want to build these behaviors that are just, it's a non-negotiable for them. I always spend my 1 hour of taking care of my body, whether that be stretching or going for a walk or a hike or lifting heavy weight in the gym, whatever that may be for that client. I've now established that as a lifelong behavior for them. And that's the mentality that I'm trying to get them into that space and think like that, versus, motivating them and hyping them up for a short period of time, knowing that it's not likely they're going to continue that.
I'm going to use the power of the pause here so that people actually take that in and absorb it. I know that's something you talk about for podcasting. So I want to get into you as an athlete. You found fitness in 2001. You were an athlete, water skiing, basketball player, being 6'8", whatever you are to whatever big boy. But you became an IFBB men's physique pro with the end goal, which you knew would lead to being able to scale a multi-million-dollar business. So it's an interesting way how you go from, just wanting to become this big, huge bodybuilder so that people, pay attention to who you are, who MindPump is, what you guys are trying to preach and approach. Then you get guys like Brendan Kane on as to how to get 1 million followers. So tell me a bit about what your vision for MindPump was 5-6 years ago and how you guys came together as a group, because it's amazing that you guys, the four of you, Doug, Sal, Justin, and yourself, were able to come together and have this shared vision. And, ultimately now you guys are exploding, right? I mean, over the past couple of years, you guys have really transformed the fitness industry.
Well, I'd be lying if I said that I had this in my vision completely. Like, it wasn't, I'd like to think that I had that kind of foresight to see exactly how this all would unfold.
We can go with it.
Yeah. I mean, but what it was, and this was before MindPump, this was before Sal, Justin, and Doug. I was in the medical marijuana industry for 2 years, or about 3 years. So 2.5, 3 years, somewhere around that range, give or take, because there's a little bit of overlap. Where I took a hiatus from fitness. I left a really good cush job where I was in management. I had good 401k benefits, made 6 figures, loved what I was doing. And I left for money. I left for an opportunity to make a lot of money in a growing space. This is before marijuana was popular and everybody was doing it. So when I got into that, I was completely kind of disconnected from fitness for a few years, and I was chasing money. That was the main goal for me. I was driven by that for most of my life. And I kind of reached the number. Like, I had a number in my head. Like, once I was making X amount of dollars, I would be happy. Right. And it's funny because we talk about this stuff with fitness and everything else, that, the happiness doesn't happen like that. It's not an external thing. You don't get somewhere or get something and then become happy. Happy is something that you internally create yourself. Well, didn't matter. No one was going to convince me otherwise that I needed to do that. And I did. I achieved this financial goal that I'd wanted since I was a kid, and realized I was really unhappy. Realized that I was in some of the worst shape I was ever in my life. My relationships were terrible. My best friends that I normally spend a lot of time with, I was not around. They weren't really excited about the whole marijuana thing that I was doing. So it was an interesting time in my life. My pockets were deeper than they had ever been. And I thought that's where I wanted to be. And I was really unhappy, and I wanted to be back in fitness. And what was nice was, because I had built a financial cushion for myself, I had the opportunity to really sit and kind of go, what do I want to do? I know I want to be in fitness. Where do I see opportunity? And I saw this massive opportunity to build an internet business, build an online business that obviously had been around for several years now, but the popularity of people on, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram primarily, and YouTube was growing. And when you were starting to hear rumors of, these young 20-year-old kids that had built, $1 million businesses from social media platforms. And at that time, it was more a rumor than a reality. I had heard people, but I hadn't really met somebody. And I'm not somebody to, I believe half of what you see and nothing that you hear. Right. So if I haven't met somebody personally who can tell me their story and say, look, I did this. Right. And I finally did. I met somebody who had done that. He was young. He was in his early 20s. And in fact, we were on the basketball court playing together, and I was like, man, what is this kid doing? He's got nice shoes, got a great car. He's got a flexible schedule like I do. And, and so I finally asked him what he was doing. He said he built a Facebook business. And I said, okay, well, what do you do? And so, long story short, he kind of filled me in on how he built this audience of people that were he was into shoes. And he built it on Facebook. He only had about 10,000 followers, and he had made this little 6-figure business off of this following. And so I was so impressed with that I said, okay, well, I could do this for fitness. Now at that time, I'd never been on YouTube. I'd never been on Instagram. I didn't even use Facebook. I mean, I come from the generation of MySpace. So I used MySpace for a couple years and then just fell off of using it. Didn't really care. most of my friends I saw in real life. I didn't think this virtual world was for me. But I did see the opportunity business-wise. And so that intrigued me to turn all these platforms on and start to utilize them. And it came at a perfect time because I was 30 years old. I was now in the worst shape of my life. Up until that point, I'd always been kind of an athlete or also a trainer. And so, me out of shape was like 13% body fat. I carried myself between like 9 and 13 most of my training and athletic career. And so I was in like 19.7%, so almost 20% body fat. Yeah. So for me, that was really out of shape for me.
That's big, Adam.
And and I was 30 years old. So and one of the challenges and hurdles I had as a young trainer was people used to always tell me, "Oh, you're young, and you'll wait till you're older, and you don't know what it's like to try and lose body fat when you're in your 30s and yada yada." So I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm worst shape of my life. I'm 30 years old. I'm in a great position to show people, showcase what I know, and and so at that point, again, I don't see MindPump, I don't see IFBB Pro yet. I don't see any of that right now. It's like, I'm just going to use these platforms, and I use primarily Instagram and YouTube to showcase my knowledge. And when I went kind of surfing through YouTube and Instagram, what I saw was exactly what we talked about earlier. Is all this hype, all this, and the stuff that the way I thought when I was 20, when I was a trainer. And I was like, wow, there's a huge opportunity here. There's a lot of these kids that have got millions of followers and making really good money, but the message that they're presenting is similar to the message that I was probably presenting at 22, 23 years old, and they hadn't evolved as trainers yet. And whether they ever would or not didn't matter to me. It was that there's an opportunity for me now to present a better message to these people on this platform. But then I had this hurdle of, okay, who's going to listen to me? I'm not famous. Nobody knows who I am. I haven't done anything really impressive to the average person. So how am I going to gain this attention? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transform my body. So I'm in the worst shape of my life. I can't just get in shape. That's not impressive. I have to get in the best shape of my life. And so for me, I'd never seen below 8%. So 8% was 9% was technically the lowest I'd ever seen. So the goal was go from the worst shape of my life to the best shape of my life after 30 years old, and to document the process. And the idea was that was going to gain me or build an authority for me on this Instagram platform and YouTube platform. And then from there, I would pivot into a training business or whatever. So I began documenting my transformation. And back then, okay, those that have been hanging around and following me since day one, remember this. Before anybody was doing the whole, what I really look like, that wasn't popular when I started. And that was one of the first things that I knew that I wanted to do was I looked at all these physiques, these famous kids that were posting on Instagram. And I knew, like, this isn't like what they look like every morning. This is like a pump, great lighting, photo shoots,
spray tan.
Yeah, everything. Right. I'm not stupid. Like I know what it's like to maintain yourself in good shape and what it takes and the reality of what you really look like and the difference of what I look like when I'm all pumped up versus flat in the morning. And all these people were putting on a facade. And so I came out really early and was taking a selfie in the morning in front of my bathroom mirror with terrible lighting, with no pump whatsoever, to show people, here I am. This is what I look like today. And that was not popular. I didn't see anybody doing that. And so that was and I think this is important when you're building any business, is how do you differentiate yourself from your peers? Like there's lots of people that have as much or way more knowledge than I do. And I'm on this platform. So I've got to find an edge. One, it was going to be to transform my body. And then two, I had to differentiate myself as far as my messaging. And so a lot of the information I would share on my Instagram was counter to what everybody else was saying. So that began to build as I started to transform my body. And, before long, I had thousands of followers, then tens of thousands of followers. And now I have a following, a network of people, and a potential business. Now, at this same time, this is when Sal and I are getting connected. We have mutual friends, although we don't know each other personally. And those mutual friends kept telling us, like, you got to connect, you got to meet Adam, you got to meet Sal, like, you guys would just do great things together. And the people that were saying that were in both our circles were very respected, intelligent, successful business people. And so we both respected their opinions that, you know, you got to meet this other guy. And so Sal actually reached out to me on Facebook, and he wanted me to take a look at this digital program that him and his partner, or his buddy Doug, had created. Yeah. And when I looked at it, what I loved about it was, just like me, it was very counter to the messaging that was out there. It was the right information for the average person. It was, you know, you don't need to train 7 days a week. It was full body training versus body part splits, which I was, you know, stuck in for so many years, thinking that was what was best for all my clients, when reality it wasn't. And so I was like, oh my God, this is gold. And it was very, very raw and truthful. And Doug had already put together like their first sale promo video, and I loved it. And I called him right away, and I said, we got to meet. Let's sit down. Let's go meet. Cause I knew what I was building towards, and I saw what he was doing. And I thought, man, this could be something. So, and at that time, Justin, so I told you I had enough capital to where I didn't have to really work or do much, and I could focus on what I wanted to build. I also was funding Justin building an app. So Justin worked for me over 10 years ago. I hired him as a personal trainer, and he had this vision for an app. And I had a desire to build an app at that time. And I thought, oh, this is really a good idea. So we kind of merged our ideas on an app. I kind of funded it. He kind of headed it up and ran it. Well, long story short, I burned about $70,000 on something that no one's ever seen. But that also led to all of us being together, because Justin and I were working together. I had a lot of respect for him, and he was not only a friend, but also a partner. And then when we all get together, you know, or when I decided I'm gonna get together with Sal goes, hey, can I bring Doug, my buddy who's helped me with building this program? I said, yeah, I'd like to bring my buddy, Justin, who has worked with me. And it's funny because when you get to know Sal and myself really well, Doug and Justin are really similar as what they represent as far as our partners and friends. They're really the opposite of us, both of them. Okay. Like Justin's the opposite of me, Doug's the opposite of Sal. And what makes that such a great marriage is that, you know, Doug's strengths are Sal's weaknesses, and Justin's strengths are my weaknesses. And so we had already kind of figured that out years ago by ourselves. And so when we came together, it was like it was a really interesting dynamic first conversation when we all got together and started sharing our visions and where we saw the fitness industry currently, where we saw it needed to go, where we felt we could fit in there. And I had already had this little bit of a following, and Sal or Doug piped in and said, you know, it was like an hour, 2 hours into this conversation. He says, man, this would be great to put on a podcast. And at that time, I knew what a podcast was, but I had no idea the extent of what it would take to build. I mean, I just thought that it was like radio, and you would need some big sponsors, and it would take lots of money, and you had to have network connection. I had no idea, right? And Doug was like, no, it's really easy. I have all the stuff that we need to do it. It's really inexpensive. I've looked into it. He's like, let's do it. What do you guys think? And everybody was like, yeah, hell yeah. Why not? Let's put it out there, and let's see if we're right. Let's put this information out. Let's provide it to the audience. And if it grows, then we're on to things. There is a need for our message. And if it doesn't, then we have our answer. It's not what we're meant to do, right? And so that was how the very first episode of MindPump, but there wasn't this grandiose vision of, oh, we're going to sell all these programs, make all this money in advertising, and, you know, scale this company to an investment. Like, none of that was like a major vision yet. Although these are all things that we had desires and things we wanted to do. The real first vision was just, we knew we had a message counter to what most people were presenting in the social media space. We believed it was the right message. We believed it would resonate with a lot of people, and it was the right time. And timing is everything in business. You can have a wonderful idea, but if it's not the right time for the market, it can totally fail. And a lot of times bad ideas hit just because it's a good time in the market for whatever that idea was. So, you know, we timed it. We timed it very well. And it grew pretty fast. We used my little base of, you know, and the thing I like to tell people too, because you think that, you know, I had probably 20,000 followers or so, and that didn't produce thousands of downloads. That produced a couple hundred downloads. Yeah. So when I meet other podcasters that are like discouraged at like their listenership and where they're at, and, you know, and they don't have a massive following, and so they're like, I don't know if I could build this thing. listen, we did not have a lot of listeners, even though I had 20,000 looky-loos on my Instagram. They weren't customers. They weren't people that were going to, but in fact, a lot of those people back then, because I was showing half naked pictures of myself, were people that were just looking at me, that didn't give a shit about what I had to say. Probably most of them, and a very small portion were interested in what I had to say. And that was what gave us the little bit of momentum of, a few hundred listeners listening to us talk on the podcast. And then it grew organically. We didn't build an advertising and marketing team until, I want to say, 2.5, 3 years into the business. And it scaled, and it scaled up to $1 million company before we ever dumped any money into advertising. So over those 3 years, we built it organically just by providing good free information and pumping out content that was free and useful and informative to people. That was how the business was originally built. And then everything else has, been a whirlwind since then.
So it wasn't like the Instagram photo you posted of Sal looking at you saying love at first sight then, hey?
Yeah. Sal and I, we did go, we definitely got we're a lot alike. Although we're so different, and there's definitely, if you've listened from the beginning, a lot of people think we clash and don't like each other that much. I've got an unbelievable love for him. There's so much that we have in common, but then we have a lot we're very different. And so it's an interesting dynamic. And never once have there's ever really been a struggle between him or I or anybody else in the business. I think that's one of the things too that surprises me every day. I mean, we're almost 6 years into this now, and we get along so well. And even when and people think like, how's that possible? You have 4 alphas, 4 businessmen all themselves. Like, how did you decide who the CEO was, and how was there a power struggle? And, we had small growing pains, but not really. I mean, that was what was really special about the 4 of us was nobody cared about being the man. Like nobody cared about it being about them. In fact, we all had a very similar vision, which was let's build this thing so big that nobody knows who we are. Yeah. And I share that as like, when people ask me questions in interviews, one of the common questions I get is like, when did you know? Like, when did you know, like you had, like, it's official, you have built something that was like going to take off and be here forever type of deal. And I said, the moment I knew that MindPump was going to be something big and it was special was actually a really funny story. It was my customer service girl, Cassie, is handling all the emails we get. We get roughly, 50 to 100 emails every single day regarding the programs and stuff. And her job is just to help guide people through the program if they have any questions. And this lady has emails in, and, we have the software to see like how many programs you have and everything about their profile. And so she's emailing in questions, and Cassie refers to me to answer one of her questions. I can't remember what the question was that she asked her, but she said, oh, Adam addressed this on the podcast yesterday, and and she answers in her voice, but my response. And the lady was like, who the hell is Adam? And this lady owned like 3 of our programs and had been following our programs for like over a year. And she had no clue on who I was. And so that was a really exciting moment for me, which also is an example of like how we all are. Like, I was so pumped that this lady had bought 3 programs of mine and didn't know who the fuck I was. Like, that to me was a sign that what we were providing was far greater than any of us as individuals. And we always wanted that. We never wanted to be Insta famous or be in the limelight and cared about any of that stuff. It was always about building something really special that built and created a lot of value for other people, so much value that they felt inclined to spend money with our business because we were providing so much value. And so that's a lot of like why this thing really worked, was I think we all had that same mindset.
Yeah, it makes sense. The first couple months, I had an issue distinguishing between you and Justin, who was talking at times. Similar voices, but I love the dynamic you guys have. It's awesome. I want to touch on, you brought up, you were in the marijuana industry. A couple of weeks ago, you posted a picture of you with a couple joints before the debates. And we're recording this on November 4th. I brought it up. I'm like, man, we got to talk about this on the podcast. And even yesterday, you mentioned that you had a night to yourself, Katrina and Max were gone. So you brought out the bong. I had a good time. Like, how how are you? How do you balance? First of all, what the hell's going on down south of the 49th parallel? How are things down there? Give me a synopsis.
It's crazy over here, dude. So that's another thing too that I felt that I could distinguish myself from my or differentiate, excuse me, myself from my peers was, and that was also another thing. Actually, I haven't shared this that many times, I think, in interviews, but one of the things that really connected Sal and I was his knowledge of marijuana and mine at the same time. So again, another thing that wasn't 6 years ago, fitness people talking about marijuana was not a popular thing at all. I mean, it was barely becoming a thing that a pot smoker would talk about weed at all, much like the health and fitness professional, like talking about smoking weed, like that was kind of taboo, even though all of us knew that there was a lot of people that do. And so that was something that I was like, you know what, I'm going to come out and be honest and frank about it. And I had good amount of information and knowledge. I mean, I had firsthand experience running these clubs. I became a master grower. Like first thing I did as soon as I knew I was getting into this business, because I knew nothing. So, back up a little bit, in my early teens and 20s, I was an anti-marijuana guy as an athlete who wasn't allowed to do those things. Also being born and raised as a Christian young boy who was a good kid growing up. I didn't do any of that stuff. Yeah. So I was kind of anti-marijuana. It wasn't until I was getting into it for the financial reasons that I went down to Barnes & Noble the next day when the guy told me how much money he was going to pay me if I would come work for him. I said, okay. The very next day I was at Barnes & Noble. I picked up like Ed Rosenthal and a bunch of other books, probably a stack of 5 marijuana books, and began reading, knowing nothing. And then I actually became very fascinated by what I was learning. The marijuana plant, very, very similar as far as the way it's broken down of what nutrients it needs between the sun, the water, the 3 major macronutrients the plant needs to grow and to thrive. There was a lot of parallels with that, with building the body and the physique. So I was very fascinated by the science and began to go even deeper into marijuana. Meanwhile, nobody I know in the fitness space is mentioning this, talking about any of this stuff. And then I meet this guy, Sal, we're going back and forth. And what we'd actually talk about, the first thing that initially was obviously the program, but the very next thing was marijuana. And at that time, his mother-in-law was dying of cancer. And Sal, Sal from the show, like he's like Mr. Read studies like crazy. And so at that time, a lot of emerging science on, CBD was coming out for cancer benefits and things. And so he went super deep into learning all that. And so what connected us was a lot of marijuana talk. So initially, even though it was like, oh, I like your program, this and that, we were talking about, what strains are you familiar with, and what do you like, and what do you grow, and how does that make you feel, and like a newest study that was coming out to prove this or that. And so that was a lot of what that connected us. And so when we were talking from the very beginning, we agreed, like, I want to share about marijuana. I'm very interested in it. I was somebody who was anti it, and I have a completely different perspective of it now. And so, I can't be the only person that's interested in that, that's also interested in being healthy and fit. So I want to share it. So yeah, I openly talk about it. I also do. It's funny you bring up that I posted it, right? So if you go back on my Instagram, I think there's a total, and I actually kind of got into it back and forth with this guy one time because he commented about me, sharing something about marijuana and was kind of shaming me, right? And I said, if you go back, you have my 2,000 photos I posted. I think you can count. Well, you definitely can count on one hand. I think there's 3 photos, or 3 or 4 times I've actually like shared or posted. So I don't ever want to be somebody who's promoting it or trying to encourage
advocating
kids
for it.
Yeah, I'm not trying to encourage kids to smoke weed and get high, but I have used it for now over 10 years pretty consistently, and find a lot of value in using it. But like many things, it absolutely can be abused. And so I'm very careful of that too. So when I talk about it, I have the same relationship with marijuana that I have with things like caffeine. Caffeine has been, accepted, worldwide for a very long time, but it's a drug, and it's very addictive. and it can take control of your life, just like any other drug. And just because it has less negative side effects as, say, cocaine or heroin, it doesn't mean that it can't start to take control of your life and you not have control of it. Marijuana's the same way. There's not a lot of bad negative things about marijuana. You're not going to smoke yourself to death. It's not going to really, and if you do it like through vapor or consumption or eating, you're not going to really fuck your lungs up. So there's not a lot of real negative side effects of it, but like any other drug, it can become addictive, and you can then let it take over your life. And I think the behaviors that it can create is what's negative and bad about it. And so I'm open about, I utilize it, but I also am open about sharing that, listen, like, I also have a gauge of, hey, have I smoked every day this week? Like, okay, Adam, I don't need to be smoking every single day. So I have this check-in with myself, as I do with anything, whether it be alcohol or caffeine or marijuana or anything, any drug or anything that I've ever experimented with or used. I'm very cognizant of how much control it has of my behaviors. And if it's something that I tell myself I need, I know I have a problem. And so, again, this was information that I felt nobody in my space was really talking about and sharing, that there's got to be some 25-year-old kid that loves smoking pot, but also loves being healthy and in shape, that needs to hear this message and needs to understand that it's not cool to get high all the time and be a buff dude too. That's still, you're still letting that thing control you. But it's also, listen, if you have anxiety or you have trouble sleeping and taking a couple hits off of a joint before bed, and it really helps you sleep better or calms you down or brings down anxiety, and you don't have to use any pharmaceutical drugs to do it, shit, I'm all for that.
Yeah,
I'm all
it's
for
all about
somebody.
it's all about balance, right? And it's like,
Right.
you guys have talked about, it's a tool. Joe Rogan talks about that. It's a tool. You can either, like Curtis Gabriel on our last episode talked about how you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to kill someone. So
100%.
It's all a balance, and figuring out what works for you, what works for your body. Obviously, it being natural is beneficial, instead of using a pharmaceutical drug, like you said. And that I wanted to bring it up because athletes are always trying to find that next competitive edge. What should they doing? What shouldn't they be doing as far as making sure that they're performing well? Obviously, smoking weed every day is not going to help you perform.
Right.
But what are some of those things that athletes should be doing, and on the other hand, should be avoiding? Maybe a top 5 list of things that every athlete should be incorporating and avoiding.
Well, in my experience, and by no means do I consider myself like a real athlete. Like, I'm like a weekend warrior, right? I'm 40 years old and, rarely pick up a ball anymore. I mean, I wakeboarded for the first time in a long time the other day. And so
you got dad strength now though.
Yeah, I do. I'm starting to get old man strength. You're right. Like, I cannot lift weights for like a month. I can still go rip 400 plus pounds off the floor. So I definitely am getting old man strength is starting to work in my favor, but losing my athletic abilities, let's just say that. Like, wakeboarding, something I was really good at, was much of a struggle for me the last time I rode. But I have a lot of experience with training athletes and being around them. Like I've still to this day, I have a lot of friends that are pro athletes and around it. And so I'll share from that perspective of what I think is killers. Definitely drugs and alcohol are killers. It's hard, especially if you're a young, successful athlete, killing it in the game, and maybe you're making money because you're a professional athlete, or you're just young, you're 20 something years old, and partying's fun when you're that age. And so, alcohol and drug use is one of the biggest cripplers. I mean, so if you're trying to be a primo athlete, kicking that completely to the curb, it will serve you probably more than almost anything else. I mean, you're really adding a bunch of rocks to your bag that you don't need to lighten you lighten your load, get rid of all that stuff for sure. Sleep is another one. Sleep is one that is overlooked a lot in our 20s. We don't seem to feel the difference as much until you start to get older and recognize like what a difference maker it makes to have a good night's rest and allow your body to really recoup and recover from previous activity. So sleep is another one that's abused, that just by tweaking that. And sleep isn't just about everybody sleeps, right? You die if you didn't. So
the prep.
Yeah. A lot of athletes will say to you like, oh, I sleep, I sleep every night. I sleep fine or whatever like that. But it's the quality of your sleep and how serious you take your sleep. So almost every athlete friend of mine that I meet does not have a sleep routine. And to me, that's one of the first easy fixes or things I can do to help them. Like, I always ask them, like, do you have a morning routine? Like, oh yeah, I get up, I brush my teeth, I shower, I have a cup of coffee, maybe I read something or do something. And they have these routines that they set the day right, and they know it's important. But then you ask them, like, what's your night routine look like? And it's normally like, oh, eat dinner, watch a little bit of TV, and then I go to bed somewhere between this. Like, that's not a routine. That's just like what happens, right? You need to start looking at your sleep as such an important piece of you becoming a super athlete, and begin to start to prioritize how you prepare yourself to get ready for bed. And so I think that's a really easy thing to help them fix. The other thing is nutrition. Many athletes, especially at the professional level, you didn't get there just from hard work. You definitely worked hard. If you're a professional athlete, you were not lazy to get there. But many times you have an athletic gene or gift that has allowed you to be already a little bit better than the average person at that sport. And because of that, many times you get a lot of athletes that, kind of fuck off the diet because they can get away with it. They can eat Taco Bell and McDonald's, every day and still get out and play ball like nobody else they know. And so a lot of times that's another really easy fix for me, is to like assess, how serious are they taking their diet? Like, are they really tracking their macros, and are they hitting their calorie targets, or are they just eating when they're hungry and then practicing and playing a lot? A lot of athletes, and I'm guilty of this too. Like, my early 20s, even though, again, I don't consider myself a serious athlete, there was a time when in my early 20s when I was playing basketball 7 days a week, literally every day. And then I was also lifting 5 to 7 days a week. And I could eat McDonald's, Taco Bell. I mean, I could milkshakes, candy. I love candy. I ate candy every night. Like, I ate ice cream and I had candy every single night and day of my life for like probably 15 years. And the reason why I justified it is probably the same reason why a lot of athletes justify it, because I didn't get fat from it. It didn't stop me from performing in the gym or playing ball. So I didn't care. It's like, I can burn it all off. So I allowed it into my diet. And a lot of that was addiction. I was addicted to the sugar. I was addicted to those foods. And much like the caffeine and drug talk, I had a really hard time with breaking those habits and then starting to feed my body what it needs. And it took a while before I really started to feel the difference of, wow, when I fuel my body properly, the performance in the gym, my performance on the court, everything would come up. So to me, those are the ones I look at. I mean, there's a lot of cool hacks out there with, cryotherapy and, all your hyperbaric chambers. And those things are all like splitting hair difference. The big rocks are the things I just talked to you about. Like, so if an athlete is listening and you haven't really honed in on those big rocks or really perfected those, start there before you start asking me questions about hyperbaric chamber, infrared lights, sauna, cold plunge. Those are all cool things. And I think that can help. I definitely think LeBron James utilizes all those tools, as he should, but most people need to really focus on those big rocks first. If you're kind of a weekend warrior athlete or like a young athlete coming up, perfect those. And that will really make a big difference before you move into like all the hacks and the different stuff.
Yeah. And that's why I'm grateful that I found you guys 6-7 months ago, because I kind of started fixing those big rocks. And by no means am I perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's helped tremendously. Even in this podcast, you talk about how, maybe not smoking the night before you have an episode will make you a little sharper, right? Little things, making sure that your sleep's better, getting your macros figured out, feeling out what works for you. So I appreciate the insight that you guys share all the time on that. One of the questions Jordan just brought up, he said, how do you break those addictions? Because those aren't easy things to do. And I know you've talked about it actually on the podcast about becoming competitive with yourself. Do you want to elaborate on how you would break those addictions, maybe for someone who's going through that?
Yeah, no. I shared a long time ago, so I don't know if you know this or not. So I've had several injuries. I tore my ACL and MCL playing ball. And I went through and battled Vicodin addiction. So I remember taking it, and if I back up and again, being completely honest about so that was a drug that I played with in my early 20s. Somebody introduced it to me when I was in my 20s as a personal trainer. I wasn't a big drinker. Alcohol always made me feel really bad, but obviously as a 20-something-year-old kid, loved going out to clubs and doing shit like that. And somebody introduced me to Vicodin, and they said, listen, you take one of these Vicodins with a beer and watch how you feel. It feels like you had 8 beers and then you don't have to drink beer. True story.
Yeah.
And I was like,
can imagine.
I loved it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I do feel like I had 8 beers, and all I'd have to do is sip on one beer, have one of these Vicodins, and it felt like it. So it was like this weekend thing, and it wasn't even every weekend. It was like when we went to clubs and stuff like that. I had a friend that always had them, and then he would hook me up, and that was how it'd be. Well, fast forward to my injury years later, because I used it recreationally like that, my body, like anything else, was kind of adapted to it. It didn't really help for pain very much. It helped with me feeling lifted with the beer. And so when the doctor prescribed them to me, I remember taking them and being like, I'm in so much pain. And then, by the way, that surgery was a nightmare. I mean, afterwards, the week after my surgery, I remember being in awful, awful pain. And I remember coming to my doctor and being like, these things aren't strong enough. So they double it up for me. And then I remember taking those and reading the bottle. And it's like every 4 hours you take one. And then I remember coming back again and telling the doctor, like, man, I mean, do these work? Because I feel like I'm still in a lot of pain. And then I remember the doctor saying to me, you need to stay ahead of the thing. So if it says take every 4 hours, don't wait until, you feel pain and then take it again. Stay ahead of the pain. So take it maybe every 3.5 hours, or before you start to feel pain again. And so this led me to having one occasionally, every once in a while, recreationally, to now becoming somebody who was taking several of them every single day, to having them every 3 hours all day long for an extended period of time. And when I came off, by the way, I had never in my life felt like I was addicted to something. I have always had a really good relationship, like I told you, with any sort of drug that I've experimented with recreationally. I wasn't even cognizant of what I was doing. I was really at that time trying to stay ahead of the pain, and was taking them as prescribed and told from my doctor. And, it probably carried on for, I'd say, 4 or 5 months. And I was out of pain. I was done. I was pretty much rehabbing myself back to training, and I still had a bottle left. And I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done taking them. And I just cut cold turkey. And I'll never forget the next morning waking up feeling like I had the flu, like a really bad flu. Nose was running, hot, cold flashes, the shakes. Like, I just felt miserable. And I was like, oh man, this is just my luck. I just started feeling better. I stopped taking these Vicodin, and now I've got this massive flu. And I remember that whole day I was just miserable, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And that night I remember going like, man, I just want to sleep tonight. I'm going to take one of those Vicodins to help me sleep. And I went over and I threw it in my mouth, and I took it. And then all of a sudden, all the symptoms went away. Runny nose went away, cold. And I remember going like, what the fuck just happened? And instantly I ran to my office in my house, started getting online and like Googling, like, withdrawals and Vicodin addiction. Like, at this point, I'm like completely oblivious to it, totally naive. And I start reading like and I have all the symptoms. And I was like, holy shit, like, whoa, my body is addicted to this opiate that I was completely unaware of, that this could happen to me. And, and so I couldn't go from, whatever it was, 6 or 7 of them a day to 0. Mm-hmm. I had to wean myself off. And so to your initial question, like, how do I deal with that? I wanted to share with you like a very, probably the most difficult time for me to apply this. And cutting cold, and everybody has different strategies. So I don't think that I have the answer for maybe everybody, but maybe this will help somebody. It's very similar to the same process of getting a client in shape and the right steps in those directions. It's creating good habits and behaviors. And it's not throwing the whole kitchen sink. So throwing the whole kitchen sink would be cutting cold turkey and being like, I'm done with it, flushing them down the drain and saying, I'm never going to touch these things again. Instead, I knew how many I was at, and I would just slowly pull back a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, to eventually to where it was 1 a day, and then it was 1 every other day, and then it was a half of 1 every other day. And so it was a very slow process, but I did it all myself. I didn't have to go to rehab, or I didn't have to like have, matter of fact, nobody knew I was going through this. This was just me checking in with myself. I didn't have to. And I'm not saying you don't need to do that. Like, some people should lean on family or friends, or maybe check themselves in if they have a really hard time with that. but I prided myself on somebody who had a lot of self-discipline. I was just truly and honestly unaware. I really was unaware of what I was doing. And, it got a hold of me like nothing I've ever felt before. And luckily I was at the place in my career, in my life, that I think I knew I had the right tools to get myself off of this. I approached it like anything else and gave myself really small goals. Okay, I'm doing this many. And again, this applies to anything. Take caffeine. I like using caffeine because almost all of us use it. Yeah. I have a number. Like if I start to get up to like 4 regular cups of coffee, or what that's equivalent to about 400 milligrams or so of caffeine, that's like I'm having a lot. And I need to come back. And I don't go from 4 cups of coffee in a day, and I'm including rock stars and things. I'm sipping on one right now. And, so when I start hitting that upper limit, or what I think is consider my limit of, okay, it's taking hold of me, I don't have control of it, I begin to go the opposite direction. So, and it's not like I go from 4 to 0. I go, okay, I've been consistently doing 4 cups or 400 milligrams of caffeine every single day. Let's pull that back to 300. And then let's pull that back to 250. And then let's go every other day. And then let's put 2 days in between. And then let's put 3 days. And then, and so I do that until I get to a place where I know I can have no coffee for 2 weeks and not have a headache and be fine. And so I approach it the same way that I would approach building my body or getting a client in shape. It's small, and that's probably one of the biggest mistakes. I think we're taught as kids, like, shoot for the stars, land on the moon type of deal, right? If you were, set these massive goals, sometimes that's a really bad idea, because then you get so focused on this huge thing in front of you, kicking a serious habit, or, reaching 100 pounds of fat loss is a massive goal. And if you're so focused on this massive goal all the time, it can be very discouraging on day 5 and day 17 of your journey. It's like, it's still so far away. Yeah. You're still totally addicted, or you're still way out of shape. And so you have to set really small, obtainable, realistic goals. You want to stretch yourself, because if you were having 4 cups of coffee every day, getting down to 3 is a good goal. You weren't doing that. But it's not so unrealistic of saying I'm done, when you've already proven to yourself that you can't, go a day or 2 without it. That doesn't make sense to do. The same thing goes with the fat loss goal. It's like, don't throw everything at it. Set yourself one goal that will become a behavioral change, and you'll never stop. And so commit to less first, and then use that as momentum to build on it. And so the same approach to getting in shape is the same way that I would approach winging myself off of a drug or getting through addiction. And so that's how I applied it to the Vicodin. That's how I applied it to marijuana. That's how I apply it to caffeine, is, back to, like you alluded to, like, it's balance and, and self-awareness. Like, a lot of people are in denial, and totally. I pride myself on being a very self-aware person. And so, I have regular check-ins with myself. Like, do I have full control of my day and my life and my stuff, or am I becoming dependent on anything? And if I ever feel that way, I know it's time to set a goal and start chipping away at it.
Well, I appreciate the honesty, and that's something that you guys, Justin talking about how he had to, go through that on his what was the podcast yesterday he posted about having that big Armenian guy shove his fingers up his rear end, right? Like, yeah. So, it's something that's not easy to do, but you guys do it very well and in a very good manner for people to take in and soak in, right? One of the other kind of, I know you're a busy guy. We only got a couple minutes left here, but we got.
You're actually okay, dude. Nice. Today I got nothing going on, so whatever you got, I'm cool.
Oh man, I love it, because I could talk with you for hours. You're just, you got a lot to share. We do some questions on the Instagram. I wanted to share with my network if they had questions. One of the questions, it's similar to your guys' quas, but I don't have the qua yet. We're working on it. So one question comes from Tara J, Taarajay. What do you think about fad diets, and how do you think that they affect women and men? Because they affect each sex differently, right?
So, yes and no, right? We're obviously, men and women we're a lot alike, and we're very different too, right? So hormonally, we're the most different, right? And so different diets women are way more at risk, let's just say, with diets. men are more expendable, more resilient when it comes to stressing our bodies. And that's just purely because women were created to procreate. So
Right.
they're here to bring another life into this world. And so their body is way more sensitive hormonally.
Mm.
So if they're out of balance and out of whack, basically what that will tell the body is that you're not in a healthy position to bring another life into this world. And so because of that, women have a lot of checks and balances, and it's thrown off more if they do extreme diets. So that's the major difference. I mean, we could go all day about, how different men and women are, but the major difference when it comes to dieting and exercise and training is women are more susceptible to having problems or issues with extreme dieting and training because of that reason, because they're here to bring another life into this world, and their body is always is checking in, going like, okay, am I in an optimal place to have a child? And if it's not, throws their period cycle off, could throw off their sleep, could throw off a lot of different things. So that's really the first thing, is that's the major difference between men and women, is that women are more susceptible to that. But as far as like fad diets for everybody, like they're all made up. Yeah. It's all made up. I mean, it's and not one is the best. As individuals, we're all so unique and different. And so to think that a structured way of eating is perfect for all of us is absolutely ridiculous. And it's more about figuring out what your body needs. What do you thrive off? And I think that there's a lot of things that we know, and there's a lot of things we don't know. I think that how you've eaten your entire life, what part of the world you come from, what preconditions you may have, all these things will change what foods or what diet you're on and how your body responds to it. I've got some clients that do extremely well in a keto carnivore type of diet. Then I've had clients that that is like the worst thing for them. And then I have other clients that a vegan type of diet's really, really good for them. And then other clients, it's absolutely terrible for you. And the thing that we have to be careful with, both men and women, is recognizing that the whole diet industry, it's about making money, and they're trying to categorize all of us because that's the best way for them to make money from us. And so they're all pitching, why theirs is better or superior. It's actually one of the things that motivated us with MindPump was we wanted to just totally disrupt that. No, that's not true that this is for everybody, or this is the best diet, or, they cherry pick the science to support why eating this way is so great. And the reality is, even if that study proves that this is optimal for these reasons, that completely changes between two different people. I mean, and those two people, by the way, could be two women at 130 pounds, both want to build 5 pounds of muscle, they could be almost identical to the average person, but internally can be so different, or, have different sleep behaviors. One could have had a kid or not had a kid. One of them could have anxiety and stress in their life. And just those things alone can completely change how certain diets respond. One of them could have a food intolerance because of maybe how they ate when they were a kid. I've got issues with dairy and sugar because of how much I abused that as a young kid. So even if you take someone like me, and we find a almost identical version of me who has the exact same goals as me, trains exactly with me, we still probably should eat different because of our gut. Our gut is different, and the way we've eaten for the last 20 years changes what diet is ideal for us. So I hate the word diet. I hate fad diets. But it doesn't mean I don't utilize them. So I use most of them. If I would train a client in the last decade, I would actually take them through most of the popular diets, and then we would talk about them. Okay, how do you feel? And then what I would break down for them. So let's say, for example, I'm taking this client and they've gone through, let's say the keto diet with me, and now we're on to, doing the vegan diet. And, she gets back to me, Adam, I feel amazing. I feel so good. I think I'm a vegan. It's well, okay, no, you're not a vegan just because you feel amazing on the vegan diet. Let's break down what foods you were eating before and what foods you're eating now. And let's look into that more than the diet. Let's look into what it was we eliminated or what we added into your diet. And that's the answer is, oh, maybe what it was you were just grossly lacking fiber and all these micronutrients that you're getting from vegetables. And now because we're consuming so much of it, your body is thanking you. It's saying, thank you for giving me all that. I've wanted that forever and you've deprived me of that. That's the answer. It doesn't mean you can't ever have meat anymore, because watch what happens when we introduce chicken and turkey into the diet. Do you stop feeling great? And so that's what I would take clients through these fad diets. And then I would let them tell me how they feel. And then I would help them get to the bottom of it and not say, don't stop there and just say, oh, this diet is for me. And that's what happens to people is they start a diet and they start following it, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And they start to see change. They see results. They feel better. They look better. And they attribute it to the diet instead of saying, okay, let's look into this. There's something that I was doing before that was probably not serving my body. And there's something I'm doing now that is probably serving my body because it's responding the way I want and I feel good. Let's figure out what that is. And then let's make sure that's something that stays in your diet or stays out of your diet based off of whatever we figure out. And so that's really what, use those diets like that for that purpose, not figuring out, oh, this is the right diet for me. I'm going to follow it for the rest of my life. It's not the ideal way to use these things. Use them as tools to help you narrow in on the things that your body needs or wants and responds best to. Don't get, it's very, they're all the isms, right? It's like a religion. Diet becomes very, religious, like where we get these camps of who's right, who's wrong, and it becomes very dogmatic. And it's like, no, it's not like that at all. And that's ridiculous to think that there's a diet that's perfect for all these groups of people. It's like, use that diet to help peer into your habits, your behaviors, and how your body's responding to get closer to knowing what the ideal, selection of foods looks like for you. And so that's my response to fad diets. And it's really equally the same for both men and women. The only difference is what we talked about at the beginning is that women are a little more susceptible. A man, like fasting is, if it's not ideal for a person, it's more likely to be a woman. And it's for the reasons that I said, because they're here to bring another life into this world, and restricting from certain micronutrients or calorie restricting is stress on the body. And a person who is here to bring another body into this world it needs to be more optimal health-wise. Men can handle more. That's just it. That really is the major difference between us when it comes to diet.
Well, and it's so good that you bring it up because, there's so many variables that people don't necessarily account for and think of or even consider, right? And, you're bringing it up. There's no blanket answer for people as to how to get in better shape, how to perform better. There's so many different things that you got to consider, and, focusing on those big rocks are important. And if you do that, then you can start making those incremental changes step by step. You guys have so much fun on social media, and we've touched on this previously. But I gotta, dig deeper as to, Sal getting shadow banned. You, Justin, you guys are like constantly throwing gifts out. You guys are always throwing out memes. Do you guys have a strategy behind it? Are you just trying to have fun?
No, that's a good question, and not one I get asked a lot. I think part of the secret sauce of MindPump is looking like we just play and have fun all the time, and that and that's all it is. Like, no, most everything that we do, there's a thought process behind it and a strategy. We've been looking for ways to grow our individual Instagram pages for a very long time. And so the reason why I do my weekly Q&As where I rapidly go through and answer as many of questions as I can. Nothing gets more views on my page than that. So I monitor my stories very carefully, and like a week or a day of like really slow activity. So let's just say, like right now, I don't know what I just posted yesterday. I think I shared something somebody else posted, and I shared this YouTube video about Dan Bilzerian. So I had right. So, which was a very interesting video, by the way. So I shared that, right? And I think yesterday's views were like really low for me, which was like 6,000, right? So 6,000 views in my story is really low. I typically am somewhere around 9,000 to 12,000 views in my story a day. So I've played with lots of different things, like trying out stuff. Nothing gets more than when I do my questions and answers, or when I share what I'm doing training, like training and diet stuff, does really well too. So that's like, there's a purpose behind that. It gets a lot of traction. So, I have a lot of partners and brands that I represent. And so to get exposure for them, to keep up our sales quota, make sure that we're doing well for our partners, that's a great way to integrate them. So I'm answering questions. Almost always there's a question where I can integrate one of our partners, and I know that I'm guaranteeing that 10,000 people are viewing that. So it's a very organic commercial or ad. It's authentic. Right. It's real. I'm not being paid specifically to do that as an ad. It just comes out. People will always ask something where, oh, this is perfect. I can talk about Magic Spoon here. Oh, this is perfect. I can talk about Juve right here. And so there is a method behind the madness. There's a reason why I do those. It gets the most attraction, attention. It's an authentic way that I can integrate my partners, which pay me handsomely on the podcast, to make sure that they're getting their sales, their ROI from us. So that's why I do that. Sal does the memes. He found a meme hack. He loves memes already. And so he started posting memes, and his stories get like 20,000 views for the memes. And so he's learned, and it got to the place where he does them so often that now tons of people send them to him. So it's easy for him. So he's getting it's not like he has to go searching for all these memes. Like, people are now sending him all the memes, and he just repurposes them and posts them up. Same thing for him. Like, if we get a lot of traction like that, we know too, like, so another way, like our sales process is to get you into like our email list, because our email list is also how we retarget, and then we will start to advertise to you. So we have a lot of free guides that serve as opt-ins. And so he knows to do the memes, and then right after that, he'll do oh, by the way, check out our free squat guide, or check out our free big arms guide. And now you've got 20,000 people that are viewing the memes. Then they get hit with that free guide, and it's free. So it doesn't feel like, you're trying to sell me on something. It's a value add. And a lot of people are like, oh shit, this is cool. So they download it, and now you are into my email sequence. And now I have the ability to send more value to you, and then eventually present to you our program. So we do that very strategically. And it was something that over time we played with different things that get a lot of traction. Those are what get the most traction for us. And so, we do that intentionally to keep the stories with a lot of people viewing.
Well, and that goes with your guys' overall goal of just basically oversaturating the market so that it's almost physically impossible to consume all of the content that you guys are putting out. And, I'm on day 18 of coaching. I've seen a lot of Sal over the past 18 days. Talked about power today. So it'll be nice to sit down with him next week and ask him some questions about all that. But it's amazing, because you guys have just gone from you cover everything. You've got 1,416 episodes now to date. And on this episode, you talked about plyometrics and how beneficial they can be for building muscle, how it's important to have properly programmed. That's what I've found with this MAPS Anabolic, is having a full body program to rely on. For me, even though I kind of knew what I was doing as far as training, just following a program for me for the past 3 weeks now has been amazing. So I highly recommend for people. I'm always pushing them to go check out your stuff. Cool. But you, so on the calisthenics plyometrics note, Ian Singleton, who's the videographer of the Athletes Podcast, is wondering what your thoughts are on calisthenics. He's always interested in hearing about, bigger, burly guys and what their thoughts are on calisthenics.
Yeah, calisthenics, I'm more pro than I am plyometrics, and the reason being is I think almost everybody could and should do calisthenics one way or another, right? I think just body weight training in general is important. I think it's one of the easiest and safest ways for us to build strength and mobility in the body. So I think it belongs in everybody's routine. And even if you're, again, like a big meathead bodybuilder guy, I still think it's extremely valuable for you to have a cycle of calisthenics in there, or incorporate some body weight training into your routine. I just think that that's smart to do that. As far as plyometrics goes, that's very specific. And I think it's also an area that's abused in the fitness world. It's a great way to burn a lot of calories, And so a lot of trainers mistake that as a great strategy to lose weight with clients. And so they integrate plyometrics into their training. And plyometrics are very sport specific, incredible tool for an athlete. And 100% I'm using it if I'm coaching an athlete. And 100% mistakenly used it as a young trainer with clients that were doing fat loss. And the truth is, if you have a client who is 30 to 50 pounds overweight, has poor body control as it is, and then you're doing explosive movements, it's terrible program. It's not it's not the ideal way to scale them. I mean, explosive power type of training is at the pinnacle, is at the peak of training. Right? It's after you've built good, proprioception, stability, control, strength, endurance, and then explosive power is at the peak. So if you're doing that with an average client who wants to lose weight, and your justification is trying to keep them moving and burning calories, it's not a good trainer. And I was a bad trainer like that too. I was always coming from the law of thermodynamics, calories in, calories out. Oh, I'm going to keep this client moving, bouncing from exercise to exercise. Not a good strategy, not smart. It's high risk, low reward. You're burning a few extra calories, and risking them actually not just risk of dangerous and could hurt them like that, but also risk of not setting their body up optimally to burn body fat and build muscle. I mean, you're getting them very adapted to be moving like crazy all the time. And then you want them to, burn or build muscle or burn body fat. And their body is so adapted to moving all the time, like super fast like that, it's not responding to burning as much calories and fat anymore because it's become so adapted. So using plyometrics for an average person, not a great strategy. Using it for an athlete and program correctly, extremely good idea and a great tool. But again, it's still, even an athlete, just because someone comes in and they're an athlete, I automatically don't throw them to plyometrics either. It's like I still am going to scale them up. They still have got to go through the stability, strength, endurance, hypertrophy phase before I'm going to start to move them into this explosive plyometrics. But calisthenics, to me, that belongs in every program somewhere. It does. Yeah. Now, do I think that you should do only that, or I'm very impressed with the guys that do all the cool pull-up stuff, and there's some cool who's a guy that I follow that I really like, can't think of his name right now. Oh god, it's Hispanic guy, and he's got tattoos, and I've been following him since he was small, and he's massive now. He's got 1 million followers, but he does like all these cool explosive push-ups, and I think it's awesome. And I think that I think there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm all for it. Is it the most ideal way to build the most muscle on someone's body? Definitely not. Yeah. What you can do with weights is superior for sure, hands down. It's not even close. What you can do with load and progressive overload, it's much more difficult to progress. Progressive overload is important to seeing consistent change in the body and physique, no matter what your goal is. When you're dealing with calisthenics, you can mess with angles and your body and maybe even strapping some things to you, but there's a ceiling. Like you can only do so much before you hit that, and you can only do so much so fast. So as far as seeing the maximum amount of change, whether it be losing body fat or building muscle, calisthenics is not the best way there. But I do think that it's extremely valuable. It belongs in everybody's routine. And I do think you can build an amazing physique by doing that. And if you love training that way, then that would trump what I'm saying. So if you love to do cool body weight stuff and you love that challenge, or maybe you have a little bit of a gymnastic background, and so that appeals to you, I would never tell a client don't do it. I would say, okay, we could train. I could train you this way. I could build a program that's all calisthenics and build you a pretty awesome physique. Could I build you a better physique if you let me incorporate weights? Yeah, absolutely. But doesn't mean that I can't, as a trainer, build an entire program around calisthenics and build you a pretty damn good looking body. So I love it. But plyometrics, I think that belongs with a very small category of people and is grossly abused in our space.
Yeah, we worked out actually this summer with the farm athlete, PH, farm athlete in Montreal, massive, huge calisthenics guy. So that's why it kind of stemmed from that question. Okay, 2 more before we wrap up here. One of them, 49ers started using Joovv red light therapy, Joovv. I thought it was super specific. It just kind of came out. And do you think this is kind of another step in the biohacking sphere that's going to be prevalent for athletes moving forward?
Oh, it's going to be yes, 100%. And that's always like a cool sign. Like NFL, like professional sports, if they adopt something, it's already been checked. Like all the science has been triple checked. You know, they've applied it with their probably their own. So there's studies for infrared lights and Juve that they've promoted for years and years and years. But the NFL will do their own trials and stuff like that to make sure that this is a value to them to do that. So for them to that was a big deal for them to partner with Juve. This is a tool that is not going to go away, and it will become a staple for all professional athletes. It's just like when we saw the introduction of cryotherapy, when we saw the what are the boots called? The massage boots with the water that help facilitate recovery. I can't think of the name of the boots.
Hydro.
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what. Yeah.
Right. So these are all, and these are all things that, and so there's a good question. And a lot of people ask me about things like Juve. I use my Juve a lot. I use it for a little different reasons. Like there's a lot of benefits that the infrared light gives that are similar to what the sun gives. Yeah. And because I don't get a lot of sun exposure, I also have skin issues. I have psoriasis. And I would actually have all kinds of spots on my head if it wasn't for me using Juve consistently or getting good sunlight on my head, which it doesn't happen all the time. A lot of time I'm in fluorescent lights like this. So for skin issues, it's been a game changer for me. But athletes are using it primarily for recovery. So it actually speeds up recovery, very similar to cryotherapy, very similar to the hydro boots that we're talking about. The average person, okay, if you are somebody who is a weekend warrior athlete or just a person who's trying to lose body fat and you're using it, sure, it helps. It's just like, would it help for you to get more sunlight? Like absolutely would help. Would it help for you to use cryo? Yeah, all those things. But if you're not addressing the big rocks, then you're not wasting time, but you
scratching the surface.
Yeah, you would be far better off building a sleep routine, getting your diet dialed in, working on mobility. All those things will facilitate recovery at a greater rate than cryotherapy or hydro boots or Juve light. But now if you're checking all the boxes, hell yes. I mean, hell yes, that's going to be an incredible tool, and more great research is coming out of it. And now when you see NFL athletes, yeah, I think that was a really exciting thing that we read about the other day when that came out for Juve. And they've already got some, so I talked to them, and I can't share who the athletes are, but there are some of the most elite athletes in golf and already before they signed all this. So they had already were telling me, and they're not allowed, I guess, to share that. I guess that's just private information, and you can't, unless they're paying them to advertise, they can't share the names. And so I'm not allowed to share the names, but it's been used by, top tier athletes for quite some time now. And now it's becoming more mainstream because of the announcement with the 49ers. So yeah, very cool tool.
Yeah. I find it similar to like the Whoop strap that I'm wearing right now. Mm-hmm. It's just, all of it's again, baby steps towards the right direction, building that momentum. And it's cool when you have partners like Juve, who you guys have been with for a long time, now making serious progressions. So I love to see it. It's cool. The way we wrap up every single podcast is asking what your piece or your best pieces of advice would be. Obviously, you've shared an hour plus worth of it now already, but your best piece of advice to the next generation of athletes. I want to create a platform here where athletes can come, Joe Blows can come and learn from top coaches, nutritionists, athletes around the world. So what would be your piece of advice to leave with everyone here on the Athletes Podcast?
Specifically for athletes?
Yeah,
So, I mean, I'm going to go back to something that I already mentioned because I know that even though I said it, it's still something, because I know what it's like to be on the other side and hear this information, because I heard this information too, is the sleep thing. Okay. It's really hard when you're in your 20s to be able to kind of tease everything out, to be able to tell like, how much is this thing really helping me? And maybe you would try it a little bit or apply a tiny bit, but it's literally, it's a game changer for recovery and performance. And you just got to do it consistently for long enough to really reap the benefits. It's not like, I apply a sleep routine for a couple of weeks and let me see if it does what Adam says. And I don't feel like I'm a better athlete yet, so it's overrated. That's what most people will do. Most people will hear advice like that. They'll try a few times. They'll expect this, like, you know, I should feel it, see it, like right away difference. And some will, by the way. Some people will, and they'll be like, holy crap, it did make a big difference. But a lot of people won't feel it to that level. I didn't feel it to that level at first. You got to do it consistently for a long time to really reap the benefits of building a sleep routine. And I'll give you like what I do now, and this is where some of these tools that we talk about that I think are, you know, small hacks, but not really the big rocks, but can add up. And so in my house, when the sun goes down, I try and turn all the lights off. Now, 6, 7 o'clock at night when the sun's going down now. And so I'm going to watch TV and do things like that. That's normal. So this is where the blue blocking lights glasses work. And you would never catch me dead in these things, 10 years ago. I just think they were goofy and ridiculous and splitting hair difference. But if it helps set up the sleep routine, which I do believe is extremely valuable, if it helps promote better sleep, which that is what really matters. If you can get it without it, then you don't need it. But if it helps that, it's extremely valuable. So like wearing my Felix Gray glasses, as soon as the sun goes down, those go on. I literally have like 5 pairs, and they're in bedroom. So I don't have an excuse. That's my thing. Like, you don't need to spend that much money on all these glasses, but I do, because I find that much value in having them. So they're like everywhere through my house, so that if I'm pull out my phone or my laptop in bed, I can reach right over, grab my Felix Grays, put them on. I noticed a huge difference of when I discipline myself to get all the fluorescent light when the sun goes down. And why that's so important is that, you know, we didn't evolve this way. We didn't evolve with these lights on at 11 o'clock at night. Like, up until, 100 years ago, we would rely on the sun to tell our body when it's time to get up or time to go to bed and set our circadian rhythm. And your circadian rhythm has a lot to do with how you feel every day, how well your body recovers, how well your body adapts. And if that's off all the time, it's one more thing that your body has to hurdle over to help you. And so assisting your body by working on that and getting that circadian rhythm set and optimal is ideal. And so getting a good night's rest, putting the Felix Gray glasses on. I love to read like the last 20, 30 minutes in bed. So I'll have my glasses on, I'll put the little light on and it really settles me down and allows me to sink into a sleep much deeper. If I have a lot going on, for example, if I spoke, anytime I speak at an event, later in the evening, my adrenaline is going. Yeah, I'm so amped up. It's so hard to calm me down. This is where I see value in things like Ned CBD. I don't think that you need to take it every single night, but for me, when I'm that amped up, I need something to kind of settle me down. This is where either marijuana, or if you're not a big weed smoking person, using something like CBD that doesn't get you high but settles you down like that, huge tool. And I will use it like that to calm me down. The next level of that is my Brain FM. If I'm in my head, a lot of times when I'm thinking business or I got a lot of stuff going on financially, I'm such a numbers guy. Sometimes I can't shut it off. It's going. And so having sound in my ears or in my room on my Bose with Brain FM, white noise, will really help settle it down. So I have all these tools. I don't use every single one of them every single day. I have them there, all to make sure that I prioritize and think about my sleep. Becoming the person who thinks that way and does all these things to really optimize sleep has changed how I feel completely. It changes how I wake up in the morning. It changes my energy level throughout the day, how sharp I am on the podcast. All those things have made that big of a difference, and it will for an athlete too. And, so don't just take my try and sleep better thing, approach it like that. And I'm not saying that you need to own all those things, but those tools have helped me really hone in on prioritizing my sleep every single night. I think if you treat it that way, the same way, most athletes, it's not hard to convince them that training is important, right? They know that lifting weights, exercise, training for their sport is a no-brainer. They have to do it. If you acted like sleep was the same thing or of as great a value, you'll see a difference performance-wise. I promise you. But you got to treat it just like training. You won't lift weights once or twice or for a week, and all of a sudden you're this super athlete. It's one of those things that the more you do it, the longer you do it for, you continue to reap the benefits. Sleep, believe it or not, is the same way. The more you do it, the more consistent you are with it, the more you'll reap the benefits from it. So if I'm talking to my young athletes right now that, love to video game all night long or party late at night and then just crash last minute or whatever, treat sleep like you treat your training. And I promise it's one of those things that will pay you back tenfold. You just got to be consistent, just like training, to really reap the benefits from it.
Man, I could not agree more. It's something I've started. I'm still working on building those habits, but it's made a difference in my life. Adam Schafer, thank you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast, man. Thank you for doing what you're doing with MindPump. I hope Max and Katrina are doing well. Thank you for educating people. It's an honor to have you on again. I'm really excited to continue following your guys' journey. I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Sal and Justin in the next couple of weeks.